We're not going in there, but that was cool. Don't worry, we're not there yet. It's a much nicer room than this. I just wanted to, it's a bit of a maze outside, so just wanted to make sure we've all made it. And yeah, just so you know as well, we're going to walk through this corridor now. We're going to pass 2 bathrooms as we go. That's where they are, so if you need to use them during the experience, you can. I'm not your teacher, you don't have to ask me. All right, let's go. So guys, grab a seat wherever you like. You can hop up at the bar. There's some over on the side there as well. So it should be plenty for everyone. Nice. Yeah, very good.
Specifically.
Nice, okay. Very cool, you're in the right spot. Well look, lovely to meet you guys. Look, yeah, right, lots of different places and favourite drinks and stuff, very cool. Well look, today we're going to be trying some lovely Irish whiskies. Hopefully we've chosen a few kind of different ones, which is the aim that, like, yeah, we'll find a little bit different. Maybe you'll like some, you won't like other ones and stuff. But also don't feel bad if you don't like one. I don't mind. So don't be afraid to be like, oh, this one sucks or whatever. I didn't make them. I'm just doing the tour. But hopefully you don't think they all suck. And even if you do, I hope you still have fun along the way. We're also going to be having a bit of a bonus drink. You might be wondering what this big old thing is. There's at the end of this. I'm going to give you guys a little whiskey punch on the way back to the bar. So yeah, you can take that one with you when we're leaving. I'll get more into what it is when we get to it at the end. But yeah, just something to look forward to. We're not just going to be drinking straight whiskey. I'll give you a little finishing cocktail at the very end. But what have we got today? Well, I'll briefly sort of introduce you to the 4 whiskeys that we're going to be having a look at, and yeah, then we'll go more in depth on them when we're actually drinking them, of course. But yeah, so to start, we're going to be trying Jameson Distillery Edition. So this is a special one. This one is only available here at the distillery. We don't sell this one outside anywhere, so we're doing an exclusive one. So it was an easy one to put on the tasting because, like, yeah, since you're here, why don't we try the one that you can only get here, right? So that's fun. And after that, we're going to have one that is a bit more commonly found. If anyone's into Irish whiskey, may have come across this Black Barrel. Black Barrel is Jameson's second most popular whiskey. Obviously our most popular one is just called Jameson, and it's in the green bottle, but it's not on this tasting. Get out of here. Black Barrel's really nice. This is actually not normal Black Barrel. This is Black Barrel cask strength, which we'll get into what they might know or maybe not. But yeah, I'll get into that when we're around with this one. But just bear in mind, this one will be strongest of the 4. Yeah, so that's Black Barrel. After that, we're actually going to take a little break from Jameson, and we are going to have one of our sister whiskies, Redbreast. This is the Redbreast 10-year-old, which is actually also currently a distillery exclusive. It's pretty new. It only came out in 2022, so maybe if it performs well, it may see a wider release someday, but at the moment you can only get it here. Yeah, so this will probably be the most different of the 4 because it's not Jameson, but it is made in the same distillery as Jameson. So Jameson belongs to a company called Irish Distillers. Irish Distillers make a few different whiskies, and they make them all down in this big distillery in the south of Ireland in a place called Middleton. So yeah, they're made in the same place. That might have been a shock to people. This isn't the Jameson distillery. It used to be for like 200 years. All the Jameson was made here, but yeah, in the 70s they moved down, just basically because there was no more room to expand any further in the city, so they moved down to the countryside where there was more room. Yeah, so this will probably be the most different one. And then we're going to be finishing right up on the top shelf with some Jameson Bow Street 18-year-old whiskey. So very exciting one. This one is cool because it is the only Jameson that still has some of its production in Dublin. So we don't do any distilling here anymore, but we do a tiny bit of maturing here in Dublin. You might have seen it on the way. Actually, we walked through that little corridor and there was a window with barrels on the other side. That's this. So Bow Street 18, it's an 18-year-old whiskey that matures for 17 years in Middleton, and then they bring it up here and recask it, and it finishes its final year of maturation here in Dublin. So nice little one to finish with, I think. So yeah, those are our lovely whiskies. Gosh, is this thing doing anything for me today? Or am I going to be just yapping on?
Oh, I have a question.
Yes, please.
What other, it's not Jameson specific, I guess, but what other kinds of whiskeys are made at the place that Jameson's made?
In Middleton, sure. So we've got Jameson, Redbreast, of course. These guys, Powers. This is a very old-fashioned bottle. It doesn't look like this anymore. Powers is made down there as well. There's also the Spots. We've made them, yeah. So green spot, yellow spot, red spot. Middleton Very Rare is our kind of like, yeah, there's one. It's our sort of like premium brand, kind of collector's whiskies. And there's a few others. There's one called Method and Madness, which is really cool. It's a very experimental whiskey. They try out different grains and different woods and that kind of thing to age it. A fun thing about Irish whiskey is that, you know, like different whiskeys have different rules and stuff. In both Scotch and bourbon, the rule is that they have to mature in an oak cask. In Irish whiskey, the rule is just a wooden cask, so we actually have a bit of leeway with what woods we use. Now, most Irish whiskies, like all of these ones we're going to try today, use wooden casks, but Method and Madness have experimented with using different woods, and they really kind of go to show how much the flavor of the wood comes into the flavor of the drink, because the whiskies that are aged in other woods that aren't oak can taste wildly different to the whiskies aged in the more traditional oak. And now that whiskey is taken off in lots of different countries around the world where oak isn't as common as it would be here. So yeah, those whiskies all have their own kind of flavors based on whatever woods they're using and stuff. Traditionally, oak was used, it's a very sturdy wood, you get a long time out of an oak barrel, and it has a long, nice flavor in it as well. But yeah, that's something that to talk about just before we kind of dive in. And again, if anyone else has questions and stuff, just ask away as we go. I'd rather you guys ask me stuff than be confused. But yeah, so kind of basically, if I don't know how much you guys know about like how whiskey is made specifically, but I'll just briefly go over it so that we're all kind of on the same page. But it's basically like you get your main ingredients are water and barley, basically, in Irish whiskey. We use some corn as well in some of these that we get from France, because it's not nice enough weather in Ireland to grow our own corn, but we can grow barley here pretty easy. And then, yeah, basically that, you make a kind of a beer, and then you distill that beer into a spirit, which is basically, distillation is just the process of separating alcohol and water. Well, separating any two liquids, but what we do is basically Jameson makes two styles of whiskey, and that'll be kind of important. So the more traditional Irish way to make whiskey is called pot still whiskey, and that's made in copper pot stills. They're these big, basically copper kettle looking things that you fill with this beer, we call it the wash that we've made, and we heat that up to alcohol's boiling point, which is lower than water's, and so the alcohol in the mixture will boil. It goes up through the whole system as vapor, and then as it goes up, it goes into a very thin portion, which cools it down and turns it back into liquid, and then we're collecting the alcohol on the other side, leaving as much water behind as we can. Now, a lot of water and stuff does get through. It's very hard to control, so most you usually have to distill at least twice to get a good amount of alcohol, high enough alcohol content. And most other countries are going to stop at that second distillation, but in Ireland we typically go for 3 distillations. So all of these are triple distilled whiskies, because what else is happening when you're distilling is it's not just the alcohol, it's oil and stuff is coming through, and so with each distillation the drink's actually getting thicker, because the more water we leave behind and the more oil that's coming through, the thicker and smoother hopefully the drink is going to be. So Irish whiskey is very much focused on smoothness and drinkability. So that pot still whiskey is all about that lovely kind of smooth, oily feeling on the throat that you don't really get too much of the harsh alcohol flavor. The other style is called grain whiskey, and that's the one that uses, like, we get the corn from France. So the pot still whiskey is just made of barley, whereas our grain whiskey is barley and corn. It's not as good. The column still that grain whiskey is made in is, it's not made of copper, it's made of steel. It's way faster as well, but it's not as flavorful, it's not as oily. But the reason we make it is because Jameson is a blended whiskey. So Jameson contains both pot still whiskey and grain whiskey. So the traditional Irish way was just pot still. In the 50s, a lot of Irish whiskey started doing blends and mixing, but the traditional pot still with column still whiskey as well. Some Irish whiskies didn't, some remain just pot still whiskey. But yeah, and then then maturation. So after you've distilled it, it's still not whiskey, it's a spirit now. And then to turn your spirit into whiskey, it has to mature in a wooden cask, like I said, for a minimum of 3 years. If you're making Irish whiskey, different whiskies will have different numbers on that. But yeah, here it's 3 years at least. So the casks that we use come to us from other countries. We used to make our own, if you go back far enough, but these days we get them from the United States and Spain. We get bourbon barrels from the States. We get sherry casks, the fortified wine from Spain. Bourbon barrels give sweet flavor, sherry casks give fruity flavor. So what we're going to be kind of talking about with these ones is, one thing is the ratio of pot still to grain in the whiskey's blend, because that's going to affect flavor. It's also going to affect the textures. If the more pot still in the blend, the smoother that blend is going to be, and the more full-bodied we'll say it is. So yeah, basically the more oil in the whiskey, the more full-bodied you say that the whiskey is. And the other big thing affecting them is how much was aged in the bourbon barrels and how much was aged in the sherry casks. Because yeah, the more bourbon influence on the whiskey, the sweeter the flavor, vanilla, caramel, that kind of flavor. The more sherry influence, the fruitier the whiskey will be. So figs, dates, dried fruits. So the Christmas cake is a big one from sherry aged whiskey. Yeah. And I feel like I had something else to say about the process. Oh, if it was important, I'll remember. But yeah, and also if there's anything that is still confusing, again, please just ask away. Yeah, bourbon and sherry, sweet and fruity. Yeah, so we'll be kind of talking about different amounts of whiskey or aged in different things. So yeah, I guess we'll start talking about the first one here a little bit. So the first one that we're looking at today is this distillery edition one. So yeah, like I said, it's exclusive to the distillery. This came out in 2017. This whole building was refurbished in 2016 and reopened in 2017 with a lot of new experiences, and the tour and stuff changed. This experience was introduced at that time as well. But yeah, part of that, they released a new whiskey, and yeah, so that's our distillery edition. Let's start having a look at it here. If you want to take up glass number 1 on your flight, that's the distillery. Take his little hat off. And the first thing I want to do is just give it a little tilt like this, and just give it a gentle roll around like so. And then hold it steady again, and you should see that you've left kind of a ring around the rim. And this is how we check that sort of oil content in our whiskey. If you give it a few seconds, little droplets should appear in the ring and start to slide down the sides. These have a lot of different names in different countries and drinks and stuff, so like legs maybe, or in Scotch it's the fingers and the ladders. In Ireland we call them the tears because they're pretty sad. So the whiskey's tears, yeah, like I said, they're telling us about the oil content. So the thicker and slower the tears, the more full-bodied and oily the whiskey is. So if they're very thin and quick, light-bodied whiskey. If they're very thick and slow, full-bodied. And yeah, it's just measuring the oil content. And they're not like an exact science, but it's a fun way to impress people at the pub. But yeah, you should. So now I know we don't have one to compare this one to, but for a blend, this is quite full-bodied. These tears are quite thick and slow. So that's telling us that this blend, distillery edition, is mostly pot still whiskey with a much smaller amount of the grain whiskey. So hopefully that translates to smoothness on the throat. Next thing we'll do, we'll give it a little smell. Ooh. Now the smell can be a little harsh at first, to be honest, especially if you're not used to whiskey. But I have a good tip for smelling whiskey. Give it another go, but keep your mouth open and smell it this time. And that should be a little easier, not as harsh on the nose with the open mouth. So alcohol evaporates at room temperature. That's a reason that the hats are on the glasses. There's fumes coming off this. So if you go those fumes go up your nose and they'll sting it, right? With pure alcohol. But if your mouth is open, your mouth and your nose are connected, right? They won't stop, they'll keep going, they have a place to leave. And so yeah, they just don't linger and they don't hurt you so much. And then you start to get proper flavor from the drink, right? That isn't just alcohol. And what you should, now it's very subjective, so we might not all agree on all of this, but fruity smell is generally what you get from this distillery edition. This one matures in 60% sherry casks and 40% bourbon casks. So it should be a little more on the fruity side, though it could be sweet fruit smell rather than the rich like figs and stuff I was talking about, because that sweet flavor can sweeten the fruity. So again, it gets very subjective here, so I'm not going to waste everyone's time listing every possible flavor here. Why don't, hey, let's have a little taste, guys, at your leisure, start sipping away, and see if you can pick out any particular flavors and stuff. And also what's cool is sometimes the smell and the taste are slightly different, and that's why we do both. Oh. I'm not allowed to drink the whiskey because I'm at work, so...
We won't tell anybody, it's okay.
Oh, that's how he got fired. Oh, poor guy. No. Just sip away on that. So yeah, I don't know, I don't know if I'm weird, but I think it tastes like apples. I don't know, a lot of the time people don't agree with me on that one. But yeah, different kind of fruity flavors typically come through on this. Whether it's something like apples or pears, or the richer fruits like the figs, the dates, Christmas cake sort of vibe. Or if you have a palate that's just very good at sweet flavors and not as good at picking up fruity flavors, you might just go for the caramel flavor of the bourbon. That really comes through in this as well for some people. Or nuttiness as well, almonds and walnuts especially. Again, yeah, it's just very interesting how many different flavors different people can get from this. Another interesting one is that as you drink this, your tongue might be getting quite hot and peppery feeling, and you might be wondering why I kept saying how smooth this was going to be, because it was quite hot on your tongue. But it's probably not so harsh on your throat, and typically speaking, the throat is where you feel alcohol. That feeling on your tongue has really nothing to do with alcohol. That's another feature of Irish whiskey that I haven't touched on yet. I said that barley is the main ingredient in all of these whiskeys, the main grain. And traditionally, whiskey uses malted barley, and to malt barley, it goes through this process where basically you get it wet, and then you heat it up gently, and it thinks it's spring, so it starts to flower. And the process of flowering for any kind of thing like that is it releases a lot of sugar. But rather than letting it flower, we have a short window where we then drive up the heat, dry it out, killing it, but keeping that, capturing the sugar before it flowers, and then you've got barley that's full of sugar. That's malted barley, and then when you go down to ferment, you put the yeast in, it eats the sugar, it turns it into alcohol. That's traditional, the way that whiskey was made with malted barley. Irish whiskey uses malted barley and unmalted barley, which is just raw barley straight from the field. Other whiskies don't do that, and what malted barley does is, because it's raw, it's peppery and it adds a bit of spice. It also adds a bit of creaminess and thickness to the drink, like the oil does. But yeah, it's quite spicy. And yeah, if you're not used to Irish whiskey, especially if you're coming from like a bourbon whiskey background where they don't use much barley at all, or even in Scotch, there's none of that. Unmalted barley Scotch goes all malted barley. So yeah, just very, very different sensation that takes a little getting used to something. And just, yeah, it's easy to think it's the alcohol, but when you get used to it, you kind of notice it's actually quite a different sensation to the feeling of alcohol. And yeah, if anyone's like, why on earth do the Irish do that with their whiskey? It's an old tax thing from the 1700s. In the 1700s, Irish whiskey was really popular. It was the most popular whiskey in the world, which people find hard to believe these days, but it was. And like by a lot, by that I mean that Irish whiskey was being sold pretty much worldwide, and Scotch was being sold on the island of Britain and nowhere else. And the British government wanted to boost Scotch's profile around the world and get it more popular. And so you might think, oh, so they invested money in their great Scottish distilleries, right? No. They thought, well, if we kill Irish whiskey, then naturally Scotch will get more popular. So they owned us at the time. I don't know if there's any history buffs in the room. And basically what the British government did was they placed a very high tax on malted barley in Ireland, but not in Scotland, making it more expensive to make whiskey in Ireland, which means the final product would sell at a higher price, which means that if you were another country looking to import, you might say, oh, well, the Scotch is so much cheaper, I'll buy that. But the Irish distilleries realized you only need to malt about 30% of your barley to get enough alcohol that you need. So they did, and they put everything else in raw, didn't pay the tax, changed the flavor of their drink. But after it was like a few decades, I think the government in Britain realized, okay, that's not working, let's get rid of it. Tax went away, and then people started writing letters to Irish distilleries saying, we like this new flavor, please don't go back to using all malted barley. So yeah, what started as tax evasion remains a tradition today. But yeah, I just think that's kind of fun. So yeah, if you get, and this one just has that spice quite a lot, you really feel it on this one, so I feel like that's a good place to kind of bring it up. But yeah, if you get spicy notes from these, that's what's going on unmalted barley. But I think it's a nice one, and very fruity. Now, our next one is the Black Barrel. So yeah, this one that we just had, this is 40% alcohol by volume or 80 proof, which is standard for Irish whiskey. That's actually the minimum for Irish whiskey. You can't be lower than that and still call it whiskey here. That's actually because it was diluted already though. So when it's in the barrels, the alcohol content is quite a lot higher. And then during blending, and they're mixing the different barrels together, they're usually also going to add purified water into that blend and bring down the alcohol content. A lot of Irish whiskies go all the way down to 40 because that's how you fill the most bottles. Some will stop shy of that, like the Redbreast we're going to have is 43, which means there was probably in testing they found a remarkable difference in flavour between 40% and 43% that made it worth it to stop there rather than go all the way down. But this next one we're going to have Black Barrel cask strength, had no water added at all. So if you drink regular Black Barrel, it is 40%. But this Black Barrel cask strength, so cask strength, the strength that it was in the cask, is 60% alcohol. So just bear that in mind. You all have little water droppers. If this one proves a little harsh for anyone, feel free to add some water into your thing. But let's start having a look at it. We can check the tiers if we want, but they're going to be really thin because there's a lot more alcohol in this one. So generally speaking, they just measure the oil content, but that only works if all your whiskeys are around the same alcohol content because alcohol does thin them out. But having said that, Black Barrel's not as full-bodied anyway as Distillery Edition. Now you can go in for a smell, and just be careful with the smell because that you do smell that harsh alcohol. But give it a few little smells. Let your body get used to it. And what you should start to smell is a very sweet smell for this one. Black Barrel is matured in 80% bourbon casks and 20% sherry. So really going down the other side of the sweetness here. And yeah, guys, start sipping away if you'd like. Start tasting, and let's see what you find with this one.
Now, does Jameson ever re-char the barrels, or do they get the barrels specifically from one distributor in the US?
Sure. That's a great question because actually Jameson usually doesn't re-char barrels at all, but for this one, it does.
Oh, cool.
So yeah, generally speaking, and we get them from loads of different places in loads of different distilleries because so it doesn't matter what bourbon was in there, the flavor is in the char. So yeah, bourbon barrels are charred on the inside, the wood is caramelized, that's why they give these lovely sweet flavors. So when bourbon goes into that barrel, it's being freshly charred, it's bursting with sweetness. Bourbon takes a lot of that sweetness out, but there's still plenty left. Now, you're a bourbon distillery, you're not allowed to reuse your barrels, that's one of the rules of bourbon, so you want to get rid of it and hopefully make some money out of it, and luckily Ireland wants to buy those because it's cheaper for us to buy them from you than it is to make our own and char our own. So generally speaking, when we get them, we put our spirits straight in because there's still plenty of flavour left. But actually, I was about to bring it up, for Black Barrel specifically, we use a small proportion of double charred barrels, so we give them a second char, we re-caramelize the wood, we invigorate the sweetness, and that is actually where Black Barrel gets its name, the double charred black barrels. And that was discovered by accident because so the courtyard you guys walked through on your way in here, that was barrel storage back in when this was a distillery. So yeah, a lot of barrels were stored outside, and now today is a bad example because it's actually really nice, but the weather in Ireland is generally not like this. It rains an awful lot here, so if you're storing your barrels outside, they're going to get wet. So when they went to use them, they needed to dry them out as quick as they could, and they figured that a char was the quickest way to do that. So they would char the barrels just to dry them, and then it was like years later when the whiskey that had gone into those barrels was ready that they realized that that second char had changed the flavor, and so then they were like, oh well, we should design a whiskey around this, and that's where Black Barrel came from. Yeah, pretty cool. So yeah, it's very sweet. Vanilla, toffee, caramel, butterscotch is the one I really got from it. Warrior's original vibes.
Definitely smells like butterscotch.
Yeah, I really get butterscotch from it. Other people have told me to get honey and maple syrup from it, which I don't at all. Yeah, you get a little bit of that. Yeah. Yeah, it's kind of like I understand it, but I've just never got. But that's kind of the cool thing about it, I think. And yeah, so not as smooth now as the first one, but to be fair, it's got a lot more booze in it than the first one did.
How do they get more and higher alcohol content? I know you said about it's the like you add water to it, but just when you start with the cask, does it depend on how many times you get it distilled, or is there
so distilling it, so each time it's distilled, the alcohol content is getting higher. They actually also dilute it between the stills and the barrels. So after distillation, it can be up to like mid-80s%, so like just almost pure alcohol.
Sure.
So they usually bring it down to about 64 to go into the cask, and then over the years it evaporates. So alcohol evaporates, like I was kind of saying with the fumes, it evaporates out of the barrels. The barrels are watertight, but they're not airtight, so it evaporates slowly over the years, which means that the alcohol content drops slowly as the years go on. So the older the whiskey, the lower the alcohol content is going to be, but it would take an awfully long time for it to go all the way down to 40. So Black Barrel is about an 8-year-old whiskey, so it's gotten down to about 60%. We are trying another cask strength whiskey later, the Bow Street 18, but it's a lot older. It is 55%, so after those extra years, it will be a lot lower in alcohol content. Yeah.
like you're
Bring fire.
That rule about bourbon being made in single-use casks was passed in the States. So it's a law. It's American law. That law was passed in the 1960s. So that's how long we've been using bourbon barrels. Because that's another thing people ask me a lot. They're like, wait a minute, how does Jameson use bourbon barrels if it started in the late 1700s? So yeah, back in the original days of Jameson, the barrels were Irish oak. And like most Irish whiskies would have done that, Ireland actually used to be covered in forests if you go back far enough. If you go back to like Ice Age times, the whole island was a forest, but then obviously civilization, so their trees got cut down to build towns and all that kind of thing. And then also at one time in the 1700s, there were over 100 distilleries on the island. So, and then there were a lot of breweries as well that also needed barrels. So a lot of trees were just getting cut down for that. And in the early 1800s, the Irish oak tree became an endangered species.
Wow.
And the government said, okay, no more of that. And so we've been using European barrels since the early 1800s. And it wasn't just sherry in those days. It would be lots of other stuff, different wines, or even just like new barrels just with European wood instead of Irish and stuff. And then eventually sherry was kind of settled on because it's full of flavor. You get a lot of nice flavor out of it. And then in the 60s, when that law got passed in the US, the Irish were more than happy, especially because in the 1960s, Irish whiskey was on the decline and bourbon was really on the rise. And so a bit of the thought process was that, like, so bourbon had come up with this new thing, which was the char. Well, all barrels were lightly charred to crack them open a bit so that your liquid gets in and pulls out more flavor. But in America, they discovered if you char the hell out of it, you actually caramelize the wood and make the drink really sweet. So that was becoming really popular. So a lot of Irish distillers were like, well, maybe if we use those barrels and we make a sweet whiskey, that might help get us back in business again. Yeah, it's cool how we all like help each, because obviously like Irish immigrants would have brought whiskey to the States in the first place, and then like years later they were drawn from their expertise and stuff. So it's very cool how like different cultures and stuff have help each other. Yes.
Where was the first whiskey made, in Ireland?
In Ireland, yeah. So it's, I don't know, Scottish people try to debate this, but like it's just like out there. You can look it up online. It's like 100 years of the difference. It's like to where I think the what would you call it, the like, not controversy, but where the question is like at what point do we consider what the drink was whiskey? Because it's only about 200 years that the rules were established. So before, so like distillation in Ireland, we can trace those pot stills back to the 8th century. So we've been distilling spirits on this island for like almost 2,000 years or whatever, not almost, but well over 1,000 years. But yeah, at what point, so like whiskey is distilled spirit aged in wooden barrels and all this kind of stuff. So generally speaking, back for a long time, it wouldn't just be they were distilling this stuff, they were storing it in wooden barrels because that's just where they wanted to keep it. And then kind of it just became, they realized over time, like, oh, that actually changes the flavor that we're keeping it in these barrels and stuff. But yeah, so it started here, and then it's it was monks doing it in Ireland, was where whiskey comes from. The Irish for whiskey is Ishkabaha. That's where the word whiskey, so Ishkabaha became like Wishka, whiskey. And Ishkabaha is the Irish for water of life, because the monks making it were using it as like medicine and stuff. And yeah, it's similar in Scots. Scots Gaelic is very similar to the Irish language, so it's very similar over there. But yeah, so it was Ireland first, and then Scotland, and then it was basically like Irish and Scottish like expats or whatever going around the world would then bring their tradition with them, and you can tell who brought it where by how that country spells the word whiskey. So if whiskey has an E in it, Irish settlers brought whiskey to that country, and if it doesn't, it was, so in America whiskey typically has an E because it was Irish people who brought it there. In Canada, whiskey doesn't have an E because Scottish people brought it to Canada. So yeah, you can check in different countries. Anyway, our next one's the Redbreast, and this is the most different one. So Redbreast, not Jameson, but made by Irish distillers as well. It was independent for a long time, but now it's all part of the same. But basically, Irish distillers kind of formed because all these Irish whiskies were dying. It was a merger between Jameson and ours formed Irish distillers, and then along the way, as other whiskies died out, they would like buy them out or bring them into the fold. And Redbreast was just a very popular one. Redbreast is very different because it is a single pot still whiskey, so this is not a blend, so this is just the pot still, so this will hopefully be the smoothest of our whiskies. It's also matured in some slightly different barrels, so it does use the bourbon and sherry that we were talking about before, but it also uses some virgin European oak casks, so barrels that have not been used before, so we got a bit more of the oak flavor in this one. So it's really, really good. This is my favorite of the three, but let's see if you guys like it. And check your tiers. So the tiers should just be like incredibly thick because this is a pure pot still whiskey. And then when you're ready, go in for a little nice smell, and you should find that it smells quite rich and fruity. It's a real like cherry vibe that I get here, or like big forest fruits, berries, that kind of thing. And at your leisure, guys, you can start tasting away. I really like this one. I love the kind of traditional Irish style of like fruity and smooth. Takes a long time. So Redbreast, you can probably tell, really leans into the sherry influence. This one, like I said, this is also a distillery exclusive. You can't get this one outside of here, but Redbreast have a lot of whiskies. Their main one is Redbreast 12-year-old. Yeah. So Redbreast 12 is the standard Redbreast. It's so good. It's one of my favorite whiskies ever. You can find this all over the world. So if you like the 10 and the 12 do taste quite different, I think, but if you like the 10, the 12 is I prefer the 12 actually, but I don't decide which ones we drink. Yeah, they've 12, 15, 18, 21, 27. Oof. I mean, the spice, I think, really comes through on this one.
Now, how long is normal? Jameson's always 3 years, or?
Jameson, so green Jameson is about 5 years old. It's our youngest one, so yeah, generally kind of between 4 and 7. These fellas, distillery edition is about 9 to 11 years. black barrel is sort of 7 to 10, I think. So say about 8 years old for black barrel. This is 10 years old. So these first two were not age statement whiskies. There's no number on the bottle. So in Irish law with whiskey, so this one says 10 on it and this one says 18. The rule is there is not, you can't have a drop less than 10 there. You could have 11-year-old, 12-year-old. There probably is a little bit of older whiskey in here.
Sure.
You can't go younger. So when you've got quite a broad range, like some of these ones might have, sometimes they don't want to put an age statement on because it's not a fair representation of how high it goes, because the only year you're allowed to put on is the youngest one. So sometimes they prefer to just not say anything. Or if you're like Jameson Original, 4 isn't a very attractive number on the whiskey, so you don't put it on. Yeah. 'm a big fan of this one. It's, it's just so nice and smooth, but quite spicy at the same time, I think.
There's a big difference between that one and the 12-year. You can take, if you know the two, 12-year is very different from that, which I'm surprised.
Yeah, it's crazy. And again, it's because this one uses the slightly different barrels. The 12 is only aged in bourbon and Oloroso sherry, like the Jamesons. But again, and that's, I think what's, it's kind of cool about Redbreast is that they are all quite different, even though you'd expect them to be a lot more similar to each other. I think, the 12, I prefer the 12 to the 15 as well, but a lot of people like the 15. But Redbreast 10, lovely one. And our last one is Bow Street 18. Ooh, we're getting fancy now. So don't have many cool stories or anything. It's just so it's matured here, I guess, is the fun thing about it. But also it's an 18-year-old whiskey. If you want to check your tiers on this one, it's not. Now we're kind of taking a step back because we're going back to a blend, but it's a smooth blend. This one's also cask strength, but people tend not to feel it as harsh as they felt the black barrel cask strength. Smell is delicious. I really like it. It's back to being on the sweeter side. You get a bourbony vibe. There's a bit of smoke to this one as well because of the charred barrel, the smoky kind of tobacco flavors and stuff. So start sipping away on that one. And as you're doing that, I'm going to start preparing this little cocktail that we're going to get at the end.
And how many master distillers or tasters does Jameson have? Is it there's only a handful, or they got a whole? Yeah, so there's at the distillery now. There's a master distiller, there's a master blender, and then they have their teams. So, but it's quite a small operation for such a big whiskey, a place that makes millions and millions of gallons of whiskey every year. The team behind them is quite small. And what I didn't realize is that the same guys work on all the different the same master distiller overseas Jameson and Redbreast and all. So it's just And is the family still in on that side, or they're collecting money in the bank?
Yeah, family cashed out in the 1980s, I think, was the last time any of them were involved. I think it was just that kind of thing of at a certain point the kids had no interest in running the business or whatever, so they
made their millions and got out.
So they're still around the place. I think the name had changed. The name isn't Jameson anymore, through marriage and stuff. The name went away, but the family are still around. But they're not involved in the business anymore. This one is often the favorite, which makes sense. It's also the most expensive.
There's a reason.
But if anyone's wondering about the prices of these, it's 65. Then the middle two are 120. This is all in our shop, and then 245 last one for the bottle.
ジェムソンのディスティラリーエディションとブラックバレル、レッドフェイスと、ボーストリート、これが一番高いみたいで蒸留所限定、これも限定って言ったかな。1番が個人的には一番好きかな。バランスが取れてて、2番はすごく甘くて美味しいんですけど、ちょっと60度ぐらいって強いんで、これはちょっと割って飲みたいかな。で3番だけジェイムソンじゃないけど、これはあんまり味がすごいすっきりしてて飲みやすいんですけど、特徴があんまり私はなくて、 少し加水したらスパイシーな感じがしてちょっと美味しかったかな。で4番のボーストリートはまあ一番高級なはずなんですけど、結構エステルな感じがして美味しいっちゃ美味しいけど、まあ好み的には1番かな。4番とかはなんかすごいウイスキーっぽくない味がしたのでちょっとびっくりしました。2番はめちゃくちゃ甘くてび
I
っくり
prefer
で
the
すね。
smell to the taste of Black Barrel. I think Black Barrel smells so nice, and it never tastes exactly like it smells.
Right.
Yeah.
And I've always been like,
But it's more of like I don't normally like the taste of whiskey just in general, but
Yes.
it's more of how it like makes my tongue tingle, but like doesn't hurt my throat.
Yeah,
I
you
enjoy
like
it
that one,
more.
yeah, sure.
So like it was this one,
The
and
first
the
and the
first
third
one
are
and
the
the
most
third,
fun.
like
Yeah,
felt the
for
best.
sure, yes.
But like these two smelled the best.
Yes, I get you.
Yes. This one really hurt. But this one wasn't as bad.
Yeah.
Like
You might like just the regular Black Barrel that isn't cask strength. It's not as intense. Well, guys, we're just coming towards the end now. Very sad, but I hope you've been having a good time. We've got one more drink for you guys that you can grab from me on the way out. I've just been lining them up here. It's a little whiskey punch. It's kind of like a cocktail. It is made with one that we didn't try today. So this is Jameson Crested. This is one of my favorite Jamesons. It would be probably most similar to the first one we tried, the distillery edition, just in that it's a very sherry influenced whiskey. I think even a little more so than this. So it's a nice fruity one, but that means it's going to go very well in something like this where there's a lot of fruit flavor. So this is a punch made with Jameson Crested. There's tea in it, that's fun, very Irish tea and whiskey. We've also got, there's fruit juices, orange juice, lemon juice in there. There is sherry and vermouth as well, and some sugar syrups. I think it's a rhubarb syrup at the moment they're using, which, yeah, it's pretty good though. It's really nice. But yeah, so when you're ready, just you can start gathering up your stuff. Thank you so much for coming in. I'll show you the way back out now. But yeah, don't forget to grab one of these on the way. Thank you guys.
Thank you.
2016, we have been maturing a small amount of whiskey here. We're making a drink in this room called Bow Street 18. It is an 18-year-old whiskey that is bottled once a year. It does 17 years maturing down at our distillery in Cork these days, and then it comes up here for its final year. So that's what we're going to see in here. I'll point out a few little facts about the barrels and stuff, and then the main event is, of course, you guys are going to be trying whiskey straight from a barrel. It's going to be a lot of fun. Just one little thing to keep in mind, we are entering an explosive environment. We're absolutely safe, don't worry. Alcohol is flammable, right? So we just have to keep that in mind. There's a lot of good safety equipment. You can see all of it working away here. The one little thing I have to say is no flash photography. So if you want to take pictures, go ahead. That's absolutely fine. Just the camera flash could set off the alarm, so we don't want that to happen. Now, right this way, guys.
Wow, nice smell.
Yeah, the smell,
Wow. Wow.
Alright, so we'll hit this.
True. Yeah, so I'm sorry now. I'm sure you all noticed that fantastic smell as you came in here. So that is the smell of evaporating whiskey. So these barrels are watertight, but they are not airtight. So as the whiskey sits in here over the years, it does evaporate a little bit. We call it the angel's share. That's why we've got a nice wings up there for our angels. And yeah, that is what you're smelling there. It smells really good, right? And now what we are looking at in here is two types of cask. Jameson uses two types of cask to mature. These kind of smaller ones on the side are American bourbon barrels. And then those four big ones at the back are sherry butts from Spain. A barrel holds 200 liters, a butt holds 500 liters of liquid. And yeah, so I used to think they were all called barrels, but they're all called casks. And a barrel is a certain size, 200 liters, and then a butt is a bigger one. And that's where the term buttload comes from. If you've ever heard of like a buttload of whatever, it was how much would fit in a butt. It is true, it's just funny. Now, a fun thing though about some of these barrels that we have, the bourbon ones, is that they've been stamped, but not by us, by their bourbon distillery, so we know where we got them from. So most of the ones in here came from Wild Turkey, absolutely. We've got a few others. There's some Heaven Hills. There's a couple of Jim Beams around the room as well. But yes, we get lots of barrels from lots of different places. Because it doesn't actually matter exactly what bourbon was in the barrel first, because that's not what we get our flavor from. We're getting our flavor from the charred wood. So you can see that up there. That's the inside of one of these bourbon barrels. That happens in the States. They char the barrel, they caramelize the wood. That makes it really nice and sweet. So bourbon are only allowed to use these once, but so there's still plenty of flavor left after they've had one go at it. So we're going to buy them and get some lovely flavor out of it ourselves. Now, over here. This is a former bourbon barrel from the US, but it is currently full of Irish pot still whiskey. So pot still whiskey is the traditional Irish style whiskey. We've been doing it this way for centuries, triple distilled in copper pot stills, and it is made of a mash of malted and unmalted barley. So we're expecting lots of nice flavor from this. Pot still whiskey is really flavorful. It's very spicy, it's oily, it's thick, it's robust. And it's been sitting here in this bourbon barrel, so we can expect sweet flavors from that, flavors like vanilla and caramel and that kind of thing. We can see from our tag that we filled this one in the year 2005, so this is 20-year-old whiskey that we're going to try now.
2005, wow.
Yeah, been in there a very long time. Now this guy is called a blender's dog. It's a blender's dog because it fetches the whiskey. Very cute. There you go. And simple as that. And now I have to use this little strainer here because there might be bits of wood floating around. The char breaks off. Not too bad that time. No. I'll just say all this stuff is pretty strong, so be aware of that. It's about 55% alcohol straight out of the barrel. Generally we dilute it a bit before bottling it, but obviously that hasn't happened yet because we're just drawing it straight from the barrel here.
Question.
Yes?
Is the height of the barrels
2005年に作られた樽だ。
No, it doesn't. So if
作られた2005年に
yes.
樽に入れられたらしい。
Absolutely. So that is because the climate in Kentucky is much hotter than it is here. So yeah, what happened when they make, so with our whiskey, we can just leave it and we don't have to touch the barrels at all. In fact, here they're on their sides, but if you went down to the warehouse in Middleton, they'd all be standing like that one, and they're kind of like on top of each other as well. But the Irish climate is very mild, and so what happens is in the summertime it warms up a bit and the barrels expand and they suck the whiskey in, and then in the wintertime it gets colder and they contract and they push it back out, and that's how it's getting the flavor. When they started making whiskey over in the US, in Kentucky especially, they discovered that because it was so much hotter, that wasn't happening at the right rate. So even if they left it in there for years and years, the flavor wasn't good when it came out. It hadn't been flavored properly. So over the years they came up with this system where they'd like move the barrels around and so in these Kentucky rick houses, they're like 6 stories tall, right? And obviously heat rises, so the top floor is very hot and the bottom floor is the coolest floor. So they'll move those around during the maturation process to get that expansion and contraction going at the right rate for them. So yeah, that's why it's so important over there. But for us, it's much, we can just kind of leave them be, which is nice. Now I'll start giving these out to you guys. There you go.
Thank you.
For you guys, there you go. So now guys, you can start kind of enjoying that at your leisure. And there's also no rush. We don't have like, oh careful with that flash.
Oh, sorry.
We don't have like all the time in the world left in here. But when we go, if you're not finished, you can bring it with you. You don't have to like leave it behind or down it or anything. So also, if it's a bit on the strong side for anyone, I do a bit of water if anyone wants to use one of these to water it up a little bit. It's good. So it's got a kick to it, right? But it is. It's full of flavor, and it's even for something so strong. It's smooth enough because it's the pot, so it's very oily and thick. Yeah, you can. There's no once it's like aged this long, there's such a complex flavor that like different people are going to pull different kind of flavors. So yeah, even though there's no kind of sherry influence here, it's not weird to get fruity flavors at all. Barley is technically a fruit.
So later, so finally, the sherry cask and bourbon cask will be blended.
Yes, to make the Boaster 18 here, that's when all of this gets mixed together, and then
yeah, because I'm feel totally different. The Jameson taste.
Yeah, yes. Oh yeah, absolutely different to what a regular Jameson tastes like, right?
But it will be.
Yeah, it will be. Yeah.
So sometimes it's like a barrel will change. So right, I mean the another day we can get the sherry cask to the customer. Usually
the barrel it's usually I've never seen it be a sherry one, but yeah, these don't last. We get a few months out of this. We go through it pretty quickly.
Have you tried the sherry cask?
I've never tried it straight from the sherry cask. Yeah, I think the sherry casks are a lot more expensive than the bourbon cask, so they typically don't let us drink
got it.
Too much. But yeah, that'd be cool. I have asked before, but I don't know if we'll ever get to see that. But yeah, it's pretty good from this one. Oh gosh, I'm breaking this barrel now. Jesus.
Can I add the water?
Yes, go for the water. Okay, so yeah, we're just coming up to our time in here. So if you're finished with a glass, the place to drop them is just over there. But like I said, if you're still drinking, please keep it with you and bring it out to the bar. But yeah, thank you so much, guys. I'll drop you back into the bar. Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Yep. Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
Now, not that door. We're going through this one here. Yeah. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Guys.
美味しくないな、そんなに。これはバーボンカスクの、原酒みたいなもんですね。で結構度数が強いんで加水をして今飲んでるんですけど、ぶっちゃけそんなに美味しくないですね。ジェームソン自体はシェリーカスクと混ざってるから、そもそもこれは原酒なのでこれだけ売られてるわけではないので、なんかスタッフの方に聞いたら全然味違うよねって言ってました。でシェリーカスクを樽から飲めることあるのかって聞いたら、シェリーカスクの方が高いらしくて、基本的にはやってないし自分も飲んだことないって言ってたんで、スタッフの方が、珍しいんでしょうね。で、ここでバーボンカスクしか飲めないそうですが、なんか全然美味しくないですね。やっぱブレンドしてなんぼなんですね、ブレンデッドウイスキーは。逆にこれをだからあそこまで美味しくするっていうのがすごいな。